My head's getting cut off. Hang on, there we go.
The top of my head's getting cut off as well. I haven't positioned my phone, so I'm just going to hold it.
Fair enough. How you doing? It's kind of bright and early over there. 9 a.m.
It's like you said yesterday. It's too early for rock and roll. That's for sure.
So, what time would your day normally start?
I mean, I would be up at 7, but sort of
Okay.
go to the gym and not have normal human contact before 11.
Well, this won't be. I can guarantee you that.
No, that's okay. I texted my mum and dad to say jump onto the Instagram live thing. I'm just now worried that they're going to start texting me for instructions.
Well, welcome, Mr. and
Thank
Mrs.
you.
If you joined, and of course, Catherine. It's so great. Really appreciate you taking the time. Whereabouts are you? Is this your new studio that you're in at the moment?
I am. Do you want me to give you a quick look? I mean, it's
Love
a mess because I'm moving in.
Yeah, I'd love.
All right, let's have a look. So I'll step back a bit.
Okay.
It's quite big compared to my other one. My other one was probably about the size of this couch.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm still kind of putting stuff into racks and trying to figure out the best way and like figuring out the sonics of the room, like how is the at the moment I'm feeling like there's sort of a weird bulge at like in the low mids, and I can't figure out if that's just how my mixes have always been or if it's the room. But my old room used to be a mastering suite. I've got this cool little kitchen as well.
Oh wow!
So we're sort of getting this little area up and running. So it's a really nice room. I've started recording peeps in here, and in fact, I had an Aussie, Adam Newling, in on Friday.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him. He's awesome and lovely, and it was so nice to kind of hang with another Aussie. And I've noticed he says hectic a lot, and I've noticed I've started saying hectic. It's never been in my vocabulary before.
And I noticed some gold and platinum plaques on your wall in the I guess the little kitchen area. Is that where you store all your plaques?
Well, I've got some here as well. I mean, it's nice to have somewhere to put them rather than in a cupboard in my kitchen.
So is this room that you're in now, is this part of a larger complex? Like, how did you find this space?
Do you want to have a look?
Yeah.
All right. So this studio this is what's called Kensington, but it's part of what is Eastcote, which has been around since the 70s. I mean, I can't think of like who was there then, but people like Adele, Mark Ronson, that's about as far as my list goes at this time of the morning. But some big names have been here, so I'll just show you. It's this amazing kind of space. So it's got this gorgeous courtyard. Can you hear me okay if I'm outside like this?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That's Julie. She's the boss of everything.
Julie.
So this door here, it's not open at the moment, but that's the door to Eastcote, and I recorded a band called The Big Moon in there back in, I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
So there's studios here and all upstairs.
Wow.
This building is I think this was the first ever building to have Wi-Fi in the UK. Well, I guess in the world. Yeah.
Wow.
Or the internet, not Wi-Fi.
Wow. That's amazing. I think the internet or the Wi-Fi might be starting to.
Okay, going back now.
Okay. Sorry, I just missed what you were saying.
Is not us.
No, that's all right. Can you hear me now better? Can you hear me better now?
Gotcha. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Sure can.
Can you see in those windows up there, there's lots of other studios in there, and Alan Mulder, who used to be at Battery with me, he's just moved. He's just moved down here too. So I mean, I miss Battery because that's essentially where my music career was born, and
Yeah,
I love that building, and I love that studio as well. I loved my little mix room, and I loved working up at in Battery too, which was the big tracking room, and I've done so many albums there. But I've been there since on and off since 2005 and sort of permanently since 2009. So
right.
I felt like it was time for a change and a bigger space.
Yeah.
Somewhere where I could have a bigger couch where I could take a proper nap.
It must be really interesting, but you must be so used to that room of Battery sonically. And you mentioned earlier that you're still figuring out some of the audio stuff in this room. Is that been a big adjustment for you?
It is actually really hard. It's kind of made me a bit reluctant to do mixed projects. I've sort of been mixing on my headphones. I've been doing, some tracking and stuff. So to kind of gauge, and I never mix on headphones. So that's kind of a new thing. But I think that the studio at Battery was kind of a safety blanket
Mm.
because, I'd go and record something in LA or, Australia or, somewhere in the UK, and then know I could bring it back and know exactly what I was listening to.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's, I have absolutely no idea. I think it's good what I'm doing.
It's a good challenge. You mentioned, I mean, Battery itself is such a legendary place. What was it like for you walking in there on your first day? Do you remember what it was like?
Well, literally got off the plane from Australia. Uh, so yeah, that was back in 2005, June the 11th, I think it was.
Right.
And Flood had said, come to the studio on your way to, I was staying at a cottage, unbelievably, it was called the Lock Cottage, right on the canal in King's Cross. It was before anything was around. It was owned by British Waterways, and it was sort of in the middle of rave territory. So we were just one little house which was surrounded by big vacant blocks and industrial warehouses where there were raves, but now it's all built up and it's apartments and everything.
Right.
So before, pop into the studio and say hi. And I have told this story so many times, but I walked in to the studio. I said hi to Flood. Thankfully, no artist or producer was there, and I said, "Oh, I think that snare needs more reverb." And he was like, "That is not why you are here." And I was like, that was a bit of sort of a rude awakening because I thought I was obviously coming over to England to make, to be producing records straight away. But
Yeah.
nope.
I mean, that whole journey from Melbourne to England is such a fascinating story. So you're raised in Melbourne and studied architecture at university, and and part of the coursework was to take a year out and actually, I guess, go and work in the field. And you decided to do that in Ireland, and that's where you meet Flood. I think it was a Nick Cave gig in around about 2001. How do you even bump into Flood? Is it mutual acquaintances? How does that work?
I mean, this is such a kind of dropping clangers situation. Hold on, I'll just close the door. Um, it was basically I dated the cousin of Nick Seymour, who plays bass in Crowded House.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know who Crowded House were when I was. Oh no, I knew who Crowded House was, but when I met Nick, I didn't
Right.
know who he was. I remember him saying, "Oh, tour's been, pretty hectic," or and I've said hectic again. Tour's been quite grueling, and I was like, "Oh, are you in the music industry?" He's like, I was like thinking he was a roadie or something, and he was very charming, obviously, and said, "Oh, I play bass in a band." And then, of course, my boyfriend at the time was like, "That's Nick Seymour from Crowded House. He plays bass in Crowded House." I was like, "Oh, okay." Anyway, we were sort of hanging out with them quite a bit, and they lived in Ireland. And I mean, just I just sort of, my sister-in-law's just messaged me about about being on Jaxsta. I knew this would happen. Shouldn't have told them. This is the only way they get to see me. Uh, so yeah, my mum's Irish. Went to hang out with them the year previously, or 2 years previously, in Ireland. Nick sort of became like a big older brother, I guess. It wasn't that I was interested in the music industry at that point. I didn't know anything about it. I was still, I was having my year out. But mum's Irish, so I thought I've got to do a year out. I'm never going to get a job in Melbourne because everyone's going for jobs. So I'm going to try my luck in Dublin. I got a passport really easily because I was practically giving the map back in 2001. And yeah, and I did it. And sometimes I look back and I'm thinking, that's such a bold move. I kind of made something, I don't know if I'd have the
Yeah.
balls to do that now, such a massive change. It was
Mm.
my first time living away from home as well, which was awesome, but also challenging at the same time.
Sure.
And and it ended up living around the corner from Nick and his partner, Nicola. And it's a very small town, lots of people know each other. It was very creative time to be there. And yeah, Nick had and I was a last minute invite to this Nick Cave concert. I think they had space in a box. I think
Right.
I think I was at the bottom of the rung of everyone that they could possibly ask. And because I was a lot younger than everyone then. And then yeah, and Flood was there. And I think he was standing next to me, uh, and again I've told this story so many times, but Nick Cave was singing the Weeping song, and I thought it was This Is the Wheat Bix song. And I turned to Flood and I said, oh, it's so Aussie that he's singing about breakfast cereal. And he sort of looked at me, he's like, what?
Awesome.
And I haven't been cool since.
But that was a really key meeting and a really key night for you. Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you hadn't said yes to go to that show?
I mean, gosh, that whole sort of time was like sliding doors. I mean, if I hadn't have dated that guy, if I hadn't have met Nick, if I hadn't moved to Ireland, yeah, if I hadn't have gone to that Nick Cave concert, I think, yeah, I mean, it's sort of, yeah, it kind of blows my mind.
Mm.
It's
So how?
it now makes me definitely, if opportunities come up like this studio, I'm like, you've got to take them because you never know what's going to happen. And also, I mean, look, I'm older now, so I hate change, uh, but I think it's also important to mix things up.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's inspiring, isn't it? Challenge is inspiring.
absolutely. So how quick was that process then from not so much meeting Flood and getting into music, but just from your head sort of switching, going, actually, not so much architecture, more music. Was it a really rapid sort of decision, rapid move for you?
No, it took another 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was 2001. And then, look, I mean, because I think that was at the start of the year that I was living in Ireland, or, a third of the way through. So then, I was like this little 21-year-old hanging out with all these amazing people and not really understanding the gravity of the situation as well.
Right.
There were lots of other musicians who I don't know, it sort of blows my mind. It's definitely a chapter in my autobiography, this whole thing. But yeah, God, I sometimes when I think about it, I'm so embarrassed because I must have been so unashamedly bold to I don't know. I guess you are when you're that young, aren't you?
Totally.
Anyway, again, I was very naive and didn't understand the gravity of that situation. So I think a classic, thing that I might have said, or I definitely said to Flood was, you know, why don't you produce me? Once I sort of discovered what a producer was, and he's like, I'm not going to. But if you want to get in the music industry, go back and finish your degree and join bands and write songs and see what it is that you want to do, because production is probably very different from what you think it is. He didn't
Mm.
say it in these words. He was a lot more brutal than that. Um, and we stayed in contact. He says I badgered him. I disagree. Uh, and then I think just before I started my masters, he had said, we're starting a new studio at this place called Battery Studios. And I said, well, I've just agreed to do my masters, which was another year and a half. And he said, okay, let's see where we're at in a year and a half. So
Mm.
it was a big decision. But also, I worked at an architecture firm, and they were like, go and try it for 6 months and see.
Okay.
So yeah, I was only planning on coming here for 6 months. I think everyone just thought I would last 6 months as well.
Right. Right. Do, do you think that there are skills that you learned in architecture that have actually helped you in your career, whether it's things like problem solving or just thinking about design? Do they sort of like meld into each other at all?
I mean, there's so many practical and sort of metaphoric correlations, I think. I mean, one is definitely that when I listen to music or when I'm recording or producing music, I'm definitely thinking about it in 3 dimensions and building uh, building it up, I guess. Building up the frequencies, building up the sonic space.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of, uh, I often will scream out the word maths,
Maths.
maths, because I'm sitting there trying to solve a problem, and
Right.
it is, whether it be I'm trying to pitch something up to a certain note, and I've got to, do some equations, or I'm trying to figure out where a beat should land on the grid, or in the bar. I mean, those are just sort of very basic examples, but
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's also a lot. There's a lot of people management as well, and managing expectations. But to be honest, that's come more with experience rather than architecture. Sorry, I just need to take a sip of water. 1 second.
You're right. Yeah. Go for it.
This is the most amount I've talked for a while. Hold on. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll maybe I'll ask the next question while you're taking your sip, or I'll take a
Mm-hmm.
sip too. Drinks break. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Not very pro.
Please. It's great. So a lot of the once you head back to England in 2005, a lot of the learning you did you had to do on the job. What do you think the pluses of that, and what are the minuses of having to learn like that?
I mean, the pluses are it put me in such good stead for now. Being able to deal with a lot of situations. I think kind of being thrown in the deep end. It's basically this career.
Mm.
A lot of there's a lot of pressure. I guess the downside is back then the culture was very different to how it is now, which was quite brutal. And you had the fear of being fired if you messed up.
Mm.
Um, so
Has that changed?
also, sorry, that's changed a lot. I think.
Okay.
I think people are more understanding. There's a lot, mental health is quite a big thing in our industry.
Mm.
Often, it is long hours, and you sort of just everyone sort of takes care of each other a little bit more. I'm
Good.
sure there are places where that still exists, but definitely not in the kind of circle of people that I hang out with.
Right.
Also, I think it was very competitive back then, and now there's kind of a wonderful community of producers and engineers, and we all know each other, and we all kind of check in, and I mean, there's sort of healthy rivalry, but no one's kind of going to throw anyone under the bus.
Yeah. Why do you think that changed? What do you think was the catalyst for that?
The industry got smaller, maybe the budget
Okay.
suddenly got smaller. I don't know. I mean, lots has changed.
Mm.
Sorry, I've got to. You need to do some talking, Rod.
I'll do it. I just think it's so interesting and we'll move on from the architecture thing shortly, but I just think
Yeah.
you mentioned that you stopped past Flood's studio when you first turned up, and you gave some advice, and he was like, "No, that's not why you're here." And I think you were initially the assistant to the assistant at Flood's studio, which meant you were doing a lot of, I guess, making tea and running around and doing things like that for a period of time. Was that was that a shock to you? Was there ever a part of you going, "Hang on, I've got a degree in architecture. I could be doing something else which is a lot more solid." Did you have to deal with that, and how did you deal with that?
Every day. And I mean, I just basically became invisible.
Mm,
Uh, I cried a lot in the bathrooms, because I also, there's definitely a kind of, a there's a dynamic that exists in the studio, and everyone sort of has their role, and the assistant's role is essentially to kind of be the support for the engineer and the producer and everyone else who's sort of in the band. It's not necessarily about you, or it wasn't then. Definitely, I think it's more inclusive now, or at least I try and be more inclusive. But so not, no one really cared just whether I was. It's just whether I was making tea or not.
mm,
And I guess I'd never been in that position before. I mean, I'd worked in the service industry and all that sort of stuff, but you were expecting to do that.
mm.
Um, I don't know, just, yeah, I think it was just a bit of a shock. And also, I sucked initially at being an assistant. I didn't have the right personality. I was like, me, 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 me. And, everyone was just like annoyed. um, so I kind of knew that I was doing something wrong, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. What am I doing wrong? And it basically was just my personality. So, or showing too much of my personality, I think.
Oh, right.
So I sort of had to, uh, I mean, gradually I kind of got the point, and then just shut up and just put my head down and learnt,
Okay.
really. I mean, I could have, there was never a point that I wanted to quit. It kind of made me more determined, I think.
Mm. Did it make the adjustment? Like, what was the adjustment like then when you did start engineering and assisting actually in mixing and engineering and, you know, the Future Heads? I mean, we're going to jump ahead a few years here, but the Future Heads, I believe, was one of your sort of your first big projects that you did yourself, or not yourself, but you
No,
worked
no, no,
hard.
no, 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 no. That was the same year that I arrived. That was like a few
Right.
months after, yeah. And
Gotcha.
I was still assisting. Ben Hillier produced that,
Gotcha.
and there was a lovely engineer called Handsome Rick. He was called
Right.
Handsome Rick for obvious reasons, and and we were up in Scarborough, and I knew nothing. Still, Ben was the one who taught me a lot of what all the microphones were called, and he had such an amazing selection of microphones, and he'd sort of test me and stuff every day. But I
Yeah.
mean, that was awesome. That was fascinating. Um, but it was, it takes a lot of energy to train and patience to train someone. Um, and once I kind of got all right, it's not about me. I just need to sort of shut up and learn,
Mm.
but still be enthusiastic. People were a lot more willing to teach me, I guess, and take
Right.
the time. And if I ever messed up, then, I would apologize and never do it again. Or,
Yeah.
um, although I did plug in some of his 110-volt keyboards several times into 240 volts and blew them up. He was the only one on so many projects. I'd put in his Juno, and I was like, oh no. And there was one time where it's like, I'll be back in a second, and hoping no one noticed that I just took the keyboard out to change the fuse. I mean, there's things like that. Just, yeah.
Yeah. So when do you think you got the confidence that you needed then to actually take a bigger role? Again, thinking of something like Holy Fire, the Foles record, which I think that was the first record which you kind of engineered.
It
If
wasn't the first one, but it was the
the,
first one, the biggest one with Flood
right,
Mel and yeah. I
right.
mean, it was all that stuff's kind of gradual. It happened very naturally, whether it be someone couldn't do something, so they were like, "Oh, you should," Flood would recommend me, and I'd be like, "I have absolutely no idea how to do this, but I'm going to give, yeah, of course I can."
Mm,
Um, and I'd do research, or I'd read a manual, or I'd figure it out. And then there were sort of a few things like, I mean, the Future Heads project, that one I was begging to do, and then with Foals, Holy Fire. I mean, in my head at the time, I was like, I'm sure there's so many more qualified people to do this, but I think this might be the last Flood and Allen, co-production, and I want
yeah,
to be part of that. Those
yeah.
guys have both been my mentors. I'd also worked with the Foals before, on their previous record, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I was like, please pick me. Of course, Alan was like, yes, I want you to be the engineer. And so I was like, well, there might be a few other people that we need to check in with. I mean, he does this to me all the time. Winds me up. Uh, so in the first couple of weeks, I was really nervous because they're both very accomplished engineers, and I was really looking to them. And then just through all my years of experience, I mean, that was 2012. So I'd been doing it for 7 years by that point.
Mm,
Um, I know, I having been an assistant or engineer, or being a producer, or or mixing it, I knew what they needed from me. So
mm,
I kind of, after like those 2 weeks of adjusting into that role, I just was like, I've got this now, leave it with me. And then you start to take charge of your little portion of the responsibilities, and be able to support them so that then they can focus on other things, whether
right.
it's, song arrangements, or kind of dealing with, whatever they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so I felt so free and very supported as
Mm,
well. And the band was so fun to work with, and um, but yeah, I mean, it was a pretty lengthy, heavily involved project.
sure. What a great project, though. Which do you think of all your myriad credits? Is there one that you think you learned the most on?
Probably that one, actually. Probably Holy Fire, mainly because it was such a big production, and so involved, and that's kind of how my process is now. And whether or not I realize it, but if I kind of really analyze, a big part of that process was the pre-production, which then kind of went into recording. So there was no moment of like, this is a recording day. It was a lot of jamming ideas, and building backing tracks, just recording everything. And it wasn't the one until it was the one. And I think that's such a great psychology, or great approach, in order to make everything kind of feel fluid and relaxed, and as fun as possible. So often, I'll either do pre-production in a rehearsal space, or we'll do it in the studio, and they just sort of seamlessly kind of join into each other. The pre-production, the recording process, and overdubs. Everything's just an experiment until
Okay.
until everyone's jumping up and down and really happy with it.
Yeah. Do you have any techniques for figuring out, because every artist that you work with must like to work a different way, probably has a different personality. Do you have any sort of ways that you always try and cut to the chase of figuring out how they work really efficiently?
Doing pre-production, or what I
That's
call rehearsals. So
okay.
especially with bands, we'll go and hang out. I'll go and watch them rehearse,
Right.
and I'll be able to kind of figure out how they all interact, how they play together, uh, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, how am I going to record them.
Yeah.
If it's solo artists, often it's just hanging out and chatting, and finding
Okay.
out what they want to achieve.
Yeah. Okay. There's
Uh,
a
talking, like just talking, really, asking
Yeah.
lots of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's when you think of I've seen you talking about your production work, and that the thing you really like to do when you're producing a record is to capture, I guess, the essence, the magic in the room, whatever that magical thing is. You want to capture that on, I was going to say on tape, but on the
Yeah.
computer. Can you think of any like really key situations where you saw magic happening in the studio and you really feel like you got it?
A good example of that is, do you remember a band called the Howling Bells? Do you know
Yeah,
them?
yeah.
Gorgeous album. I think we did was called Heartstrings, and we did it very quickly, but they were very well rehearsed.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things we did in the studio, I think it was on a song called Paris. I just got them to kind of jam the intro because all the songs, had sort of snappy intros. The verse comes in, and there was just something sort of really dreamy about that evening. We had a lot of mood lighting going on, a lot of candles lit. The reverb was just, um, and there was something very laconic. Is that the word? Or I don't know, just, uh, I don't know. There was something, and I was just like, just jam around that intro, and then just come in whenever you want.
Yeah.
And it made the record, but I don't know, being able to kind of create a space for uh, the happy accidents and the imperfections to happen are kind of what excites me. So that's why kind of rehearsal and pre-production is so important, because you get the fundamentals right, but it means everything else around it can surprise you. I
Yeah,
don't know.
absolutely. You've spoken about working with the Big Moon, and I think when you're recording with them, you had things like blow up flamingos and things like that in the studio to create that kind of vibe. Is that something that you will try and do from time to time, whether it be
Or
prop?
I always do it, whether I'm wearing a lab coat or, there'll always be something that's appropriate to the record. Like when I work with Manchester Orchestra, I bought everyone boiler suits, and we all wore. Well, to be honest, only three of us did. The rest of the band refused. So yeah, we'll sort of dress up. I don't know. It's good camaraderie.
Yeah.
But the reason for that Big Moon situation was because I was supposed to be on holidays in the Bahamas. A friend, it sounds way more fancy than it is, but a friend of mine was living out there at the time, and I was going to go and visit him
Okay.
before working with Manchester Orchestra in the States. And uh, this was the only time that they could do it, and it was the only time that I could squeeze it in before Manchester Orchestra, which was going to be about 6 months.
Right.
And I really wanted to work with them. So I was like, okay, but we're going to make it like we're on holiday. So we all wore Hawaiian shirts and leis and yeah, palm trees and flamingos.
Nice. So it's important to have fun, right? It's important to have fun in the studio.
I mean, it's so, even if it's a dark record, I mean,
Yeah.
the Big Moon Girls is so fun. I mean, that album is really fun. I think there's an energy about that is really fun,
Sure.
and this, it suits their personality. It's what kind of ever suits the personality of the artist, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned Manchester Orchestra, and I think it was the Million Masks of God that you produced and mixed and engineered.
Yeah,
Um,
and their previous one, A Black
yeah.
Mile to the Service. Yeah,
Yeah. What is it like working with that band? You obviously have a great relationship with them.
yeah. I mean, I was going to go, oh no, it sucks, but obviously it doesn't, because we work together all the time. uh, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, that relationship took a minute to solidify. We were definitely. Uh, I was coming into, it was their fifth record, which was A Black Mile to the Surface. Um, I assumed because they were on their fifth record that it would be, I'd be like, oh, they know what they're doing. Not that they didn't know what they were doing, but because it was their fifth record, they were putting so much pressure on themselves. So there was a lot going on for them. And I was walking in going, oh, this is, I could do this with my eyes closed. I love the music. they're going to be really experienced. It's going to be really fun. But I mean, their expectations were, it pushed me to another level.
Right.
Uh, and also there was this kind of, we were just sizing each other up the whole time, not
Yeah.
really knowing.
Yeah.
Um, and after a lot of bourbon and a lot of late night chats, we became best mates. But
Right.
it took a little minute. It was about earning each other's trust. I mean,
Sure.
those guys are geniuses. Um, we had the time to do that. Often you've got to kind of earn the trust pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
yeah,
What,
Rod, water break.
water break. All right. Please, you know what? I'll do the same too. We're almost done. Just a
Oh,
couple
okay,
more to ask
of
you.
course.
Thank you so much for all your time with this. I will too.
Oh,
Will have to drink some water.
not at all.
So it was interesting when you were saying that with Manchester Orchestra, it took a while to, I guess, figure out the dynamic. Do you when you start working with a band or in any studio situation, do you manage to take time for yourself to get yourself in a headspace where you can get away from, I guess, the stress of working on a record or the stress of trying to work out a dynamic and just decompress and clear your head? Do you ever do that? Do you ever have the opportunity to do that?
What, while I'm making a record or in between records?
No, while you're making a record. So just particularly in that initial phase when you're trying to work each other out and maybe it's not quite gelling or it's a little bit stressful. Do you take time to step back or do you just have to keep plowing through?
I mean, that's a good question. Fortunately, I've never sort of really. I might have only been in those situations once or twice,
Mm,
and that was sort of early on. No, thankfully, I don't know. Things sort of always. I mean, look, and I enjoy that kind of challenge or that tussle. Um,
that's okay. If that's
yeah, I mean,
fine.
I mean, yeah, it is. I'll talk to my manager, I guess, or I'll talk to their manager, or I'll just communicate with them. I'm
Yeah,
pretty hyper aware and overly sensitive about what's going on, so I'll
yeah.
try and kind of eke it out of them what they're trying to communicate.
Gotcha. Fair
You know
enough.
what I'll force them to communicate because it's just more efficient, I guess. Yeah, that's probably what I'll do. Yes.
Okay. Last thing, just about the awards that you've got. Obviously, with the MPG, I think it was
I
the
know.
break.
Sorry, that was not intentional that they're sitting there.
Oh no, I think it's great. It's so nice to see them. You should give us a close up. I'd love to. But when you think about things like that, and wow, look at it, look at. Well, we can almost say, oh, nice.
Well,
So what have we got
one
there?
one is for what's that one? Oh, that's Producer of the Year,
Yeah,
2018.
yeah,
Oh, what's that one? Breakthrough Producer of the Year, 2016.
yeah.
And I think this one's for Holy Fire. That's UK Album of the Year 2014. God, that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I've also got this one, just while we're on my awards. It's so random. I don't know why I got it, but I won Producer of the Year at the Heavy Music Awards. It was like,
Nice.
it was during the pandemic, so I had to do like a lot, a sort of Zoom acceptance kind of thing.
Okay.
But I don't know why it was. I mean, it's pretty cool. The
Very cool.
award is the award is also ridiculously heavy. It weighs about 5 kilos.
But when you think about where you came from and the years where you had to really grind and figure out stuff by yourself and learn all these things by yourself, and obviously with the mentor, of Alan and Flood, but still you had to do it all. You had to dedicate yourself to it. When you win something like Breakthrough Producer of the Year, were you able to take a minute and just think like, wow, I've done it. I've come a long way.
It's so weird. I had the opposite reaction. I think I got really bad depression just after that. And I took it to bed with me one day, and I think I was like in bed for a week, and I was like, why isn't it? Because I think it was the thing that I thought that I always, wanted. It was what I was essentially working for, this kind of affirmation by your peers.
Mm,
And it had the total opposite effect. I was like, oh, I'm not worthy,
mm,
and I was talking to a really good friend of mine who owns a record label, and he was like, I know exactly, you know, when he got his first #1 or made his first million, you know, it's like, what it's not doing the thing that I thought it would do. It doesn't fill your soul. And he said, what makes me, you know, what I realized is that it's actually going into work every day and enjoying what you do, and rather than the, you know, the end goal, it's about every day that you walk into the studio. And
Yeah.
God, that transformed my perspective and attitude.
Right. Wow.
It changed how I picked projects to work on. You know, I want to go in every day and enjoy the process. You know, we all sacrifice a lot to do this, you know, whether it's money or, you know, time or socializing or, you know, whatever. You know, this is a lifestyle. It's not a 9 to 5. So yeah, I think it was kind of one of the best turning moments, I think, in my career, because I bounce to work now, and I work
No,
with great people.
that's awesome. I think that's a great note on which to end, Catherine, and to give your voice a break. So thank you so much for your time. It's been so great to chat. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure, Rod. Thank you so much, and I'd love to do this again sometime. It was great.
Sure, we could do parts 2, 3, and 4. There's so much to talk about,
I know.
but now, thank you so much, Catherine. Have a great day.
Have a good evening. Bye.
See ya. Bye.